All right. The other story is this Vatican cleric saying, "Hey, yeah, you could be a Freemason. Go for it. It's awesome." So it's Father Michael Heinrich Weninger. He wrote a 500-page book called Lodge and Altar. For those that don't know, basically the assembly halls for Masons is called a lodge. Lodge and Altar on the reconciliation of the Catholic Church and regular Freemasonry. This is the book he wrote. He launched the book in Vienna, in Austria, and he was accompanied at the book launch with the Austrian Lodge Grand Master Georg Selmer. Georg Selmer. Semler identifies as a, quote, committed Catholic, while Weninger it was ordained by Cardinal Christoph Schönborn in 2011. He was outed as a Freemason when celebrating Mass at the consecration of a new lodge of Mark Master Masons number 1954 in 2014. So the guy was ordained by Schönborn in 2011, and he was found celebrating Mass at a Freemasonic lodge in 2014. I mean, I can't even begin to understand this, Matt.
I can't either. I mean, just to be very clear, the church has from the outset of Freemasonry, as you and I have discussed before on your
Yes.
show, modern Freemasonry came into existence in the early 1700s, the Grand Lodge of London, and ever since then, I can't remember the date of the first papal condemnation, but it's early 1700s.
1700s, yeah.
Yeah, it's like 1730 something, I believe. And since then, it's been condemned, I believe, a total of like 23 times by 12 different popes.
Yeah.
Up to and including, and it's never been revoked. It can't be revoked because Freemasonry, based on its principles, is irreconcilable with the Catholic faith. I mean, this you quote at length. You actually provide the full text of the Alta Vendita in your book. And I have my friend John Venari, God rest his soul, his little booklet, Permanent Instruction of the Alta Vendita. And in the Alta Vendita, which is this Masonic blueprint, as John referred to it as, for the subversion of the Catholic Church, it starts by saying, or at least this section of it says, "Our ultimate end is that of Voltaire and of the French Revolution, the final destruction of Catholicism and even of the Christian idea." I mean, how much clearer can they be? Their purpose, their reason for being is to destroy the church, to destroy Christendom. So this notion that there can be a reconciliation between the lodge and the altar is absolutely ridiculous. Not to mention excommunicable. I mean, he's, according to even the current law of the church, this priest, for outing himself as a Freemason, is done.
He's excommunicated.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. When my book last year, Infiltration, came out, people said Taylor Marshall is talking about Freemasons in the church. That's retarded. That's a conspiracy theory. Everybody knows that's not true. Well, look, folks, in Vienna, Austria, where our friend Alexander Chugwell is, we need to get Alexander get looking into this here. There's a priest who wrote a 500-page book celebrating the fusion of Freemasonry and Catholicism. He's celebrating Mass at the lodge. And he's apparently doing this with the knowledge of a cardinal prince of the church, Cardinal Schönborn.
And just to drive home the point of the seriousness of this, several popes, including Pope Pius IX, in his document encyclical called Esti Multa, he applies the verse from the book of the Apocalypse, from chapter 2, verse 9. He applies the title, "The Synagogue of Satan," to Freemasonry,
yes,
to the Masonic Lodge. You can look that up in the encyclical Esti Multa, paragraph number 28. It was published in 1873. And a
Freemasonry,
general,
Synagogue of Satan. Did everybody hear that? Make a mental note.
yes,
Synagogue of Satan. I'm reading right now Lord of the World by Benson.
okay,
Uh, it's actually, I got to admit, this is like my third or fourth time I try to read it. I usually get in the first like several chapters and I get kind of bored with the English dialogue, but now I'm over halfway done with it and I'm loving it. Can't put it down. But the
nice.
whole end time scenario in his book is the Freemasons taking over. And what's interesting in the book Lord of the World is the world becomes more and more secularist. You know, you can kind of see it in our own time with like the UN and the EU. And this American, I think he's a senator, he says, no, we need to reestablish divine worship as part of our government. This is in the heart of men to worship. We need worship. And so he starts to mandate 4 feasts every year. There's a fall feast for paternity, a winter feast, which just replaces Christmas, maternity, and then life and sustenance for the 4 seasons. And you're required to show up at the cathedrals, at the monasteries, and attend these things to worship, because humans have to worship. That's how the Antichrist in this novel breaks it down. He says, no, we need to have government mandated and approved worship because all humans want to worship. And of course, this is reign of Antichrist. Even the Pope. You know what's crazy? Have you read the book, Matt?
I've heard that Pope Francis, I think he's recommended it on occasion, but I have not read it, which is interesting that he's recommending this. Is it like...
I know. It's kind of weird. You should read it, Matt. I want to get your take on it, but I'm sure people watching right now have read the book. But what's interesting is the Pope, Papa Angelicus, he calls his cardinals and leaders together in Rome. And by the way, in the future, the Pope has exchanged all the church property in Italy just to have the city of Rome. So he owns Rome. It's a Catholic papal state, Rome itself. And the official language is Latin, so everybody speaks Latin in the city. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
So he's speaking to everyone in Latin, and he says, look, you know, we had the Benedictines and the Augustinians and the Franciscans and the Dominicans and the Cistercians and the Jesuits, all, you know, during these crises of the church. And he says, I fear we're in the final crisis of the great falling away. And therefore, I, as Pope, establish a new order of poverty, chastity, and obedience with the 4th vow, the intention and the acceptance to receive martyrdom as a Catholic. That's the 4th vow. And to go into all the world and to preach the gospel and to save souls and to fight the great apostasy.
Right.
It's cool.
Wow.
But what's crazy about it is, in the book, this is all happening in the future. He's writing this around like 1910 or something. He is not aware that there's a Vatican II, or that there will be. In the future, all the priests are all celebrating Latin masses and Latin rites, and they know Latin. He projects into the future his own stable and strong church under Pius X, and projects it into the future. And what's not believable about this novel, Lord of the World, is he doesn't realize that in the future, the spirit of Antichrist and the spirit of Freemasonry had burrowed its way into the Catholic Church and into the Vatican. That's why, as I'm reading this novel, I'm thinking, this is cool, but he didn't foresee the wiles of the devil, and that would be the plot to destroy the church from within.
Exactly. And I think another crucial point that folks have to understand regarding Freemasonry is that it not only seeks to destroy the church and Christian civilization, but it seeks to replace it with a mock version of Catholicism. That's essentially, I mean, in many ways, that's what Freemasonry is. All of their rites, their ceremonies, their teachings are actually have a lot of biblical references, especially to the Old Testament. So they're trying to replace the church, not only to destroy it. And I heard an amazing, a very illuminating talk at the 2017 Angelus Press Conference, which was devoted to Fatima, Our Lady's answer to 3 revolutions. The 3 revolutions, of course, being 1517, 1717 Freemasonry, and 1917 communism. And the talk specifically, there were 2 on this issue. First of all was Father Juan Carlos Iscara, who I know he's from South America. I forget which country, but he's a fellow South American with Pope Francis. That's interesting, but he's an SSPX priest. And his talk was entitled Freemasonry, the Anti-Church. Mm-hmm. And he explained that the nature of Freemasonry really is the contre-Église, which is French for counter-church, namely a society which not only labors against the church, but also presents itself as an alternative to the church, one meant to supersede and replace it. Excuse me. And the other very striking, very sobering talk was given by a gentleman named John Salza, who is the co-author of a book you and I have referenced several times, The True or False Pope, which is very important reading for these days. He himself was a former 32-degree Freemason, and he describes how he was lured into what Pius the Ninth referred to as the synagogue of Satan as a young man fresh out of law school, because they're out to poach. I mean, they're not just this benevolent kind of.
You mean they're proselytizing?
Yeah, exactly right. They are absolutely proselytizing. So, by the grace of God, thanks be to God, John got out of the cult, out of Freemasonry, and has since been writing books, one of which is a very easy read, very thin title. It's called Why Catholics Cannot Be Masons, that Father so-and-so should get a copy of this and read it.
Yeah, he needs to get that ASAP.
Because basically, as we've discussed on your show before, the way that they lure them in, it's somewhat similar to the Mormons, how they just say, oh, we're just like you. We believe in God. We believe in Jesus. But it's not the God of the Bible. It's not the God of divine revelation. It's their own God, which in Freemasonry ultimately ends up being Satan, Lucifer.
Oh.
And John Salza in his talk went into that, how they give a couple examples here. He went through the first, basically he gave a description of the first 3 degrees of Masonic initiation, which every Mason, regardless of the rite or how high up they go, every Freemason has gone through these 3 rituals. And he says the third, so I'll just start with the first one here. He emphasized more than once that every Mason has gone through what he described. The first degree ritual began, he explained, with the requirement to strip down to his underclothes, remove any and all sacramentals. For example, he was wearing a crucifix necklace and his wedding ring, and he was required to remove those before going into the lodge.
Because a wedding ring is a sacramental. People need to know that.
That's right.
There was an indulgence in the old days to kiss your spouse's wedding ring because it's a sacramental.
Mm-hmm. So he was required to remove those and submit to wearing a blindfold over his eyes and a noose around his neck. So keep in mind, folks, this priest has gone through this ritual if he's a Freemason. When John inquired at the time about the reason for all this, he was told it would be explained later, quote, in the lodge. He was then led, still blindfolded, into the lodge meeting where the initiated members were assembled, and he felt the tip of a sharp metal instrument, a sword or a dagger, jab his chest on the left side over his heart. This startling reception was accompanied by the ominous declaration, quote, "As this is an instrument of torture to your flesh, so should the recollection of it be to your conscience, should you ever presume to reveal the secrets of Freemasonry unlawfully." End quote.
Wow.
That's just the first degree. And it's basically starting with a death threat.
Yeah. And like you said, this priest in Austria who's celebrating Mass at the lodge, he's done this right. This sacrilegious satanic rite. He's done it. Yep.
And it gets worse from here. That John described in his talk in 2017, and I wrote about this. It's available at CatholicFamilyNews.com. The second and third degree rituals, as Mr. Salza explained, contain such abominations as bowing down in idolatry to the letter G, representing the false god of Freemasonry, the grand architect of the universe, which hangs behind the chair of the, quote, worshipful master. That's what the president of the lodge is called, worshipful master. and other mockeries of the Catholic faith. These blasphemies are accompanied by instruction in heretical doctrines, including the false claims that salvation comes through natural virtue and that all men, regardless of their religion, will rise from the dead to eternal life. That's all part of Freemasonry. It's all outlined in detail, very succinctly in this booklet published by Tan. So it's very, very serious, scary stuff.
Yeah. I mean, this is in the church, guys. This
I
is in
also
the
thought
church.
it was interesting. We should also bring up, this is a more of a hopeful article that was published about a week ago, I think a week ago today. Thankfully, another gentleman who used to be a Freemason but has since renounced it and converted to Catholicism, there's an article published by the National Catholic Register on February 14th. The headline says, "Confessions of a former Freemason officer converted to Catholicism." So another story probably similar to John Salsa's, where he's gotten out of it and now he's, sounding the alarm for people, other Catholics, like, this is terrible satanic stuff. This is not okay. We need to be speaking up about this.
Yes. I'd like to read, just in case there's some people out there who have heard it said, oh, well, we used to be against Freemasons, but now we realize that, they just want to have universal brotherhood and friendship. And, they all believe in God and we believe in God and Jews believe in God and Muslims believe in God. So we're all doing the same thing. I want to read a 1983 Declaration on Masonic Association.
Yes.
From John Paul II. It says, quote, "The Church's negative judgment in regard to Masonic association remains unchanged, since their principles have always been considered irreconcilable with the doctrine of the Church, and therefore membership in them remains forbidden. The faithful who enroll in Masonic associations are in a state of grave sin and may not receive communion," end quote. Here it assumes that only lay people would do something so dumb as to become a Freemason. And it says they are in a state of grave sin and may not receive communion. Here we have a priest in Austria who is presumably celebrating Mass every day. I would even question if he has true intent to confect the miracle of transubstantiation, who's presuming to receive communion every day as a Freemason and publicly leading souls astray.
With the permission of the local Cardinal Archbishop.
Schomborn. Cardinal Schomborn is the biggest disappointment. He is a modernist. He is bad news. Schomborn is no good.
Yep.
So, yeah, and like you said, we had just this past week that other story of the guy who was a Freemason. He visited Lord. He had a conversion, and he came out of it. And he testifies that he was startled. I don't have the article open, but I remember reading it recently. He was startled when he was in the lodge and he heard a worshipful master invoking Lucifer in a rite. Mm-hmm. He was like, whoa, I didn't know we did that. Maybe I need to look into this a little bit more. So
exactly right.
Freemasonry is satanic. It's a synagogue of Satan. If you have ever been one, you need to renounce it. Father Ripperger talks about this. There are prayers. You can go to the fathers of the, what's Ripperger's order? The Dolorous Our Lady?
Yeah, it's the most...
They're called the Doloran Fathers, but I'm trying to remember the full name.
The Most Sorrowful Mother.
Most Sorrowful Mother.
Yeah.
They're an order of exorcists, and I've done it because my grandfather was a Freemason. Mm-hmm. So we actually had Father Ripperger pray the exorcism over myself, Joy, and all 8 of our children together.
Yep.
To break the bonds of Freemasonry. And then he also said, as the father of the family, I should also do the renunciation, which is long, several pages. Mm-hmm. And I also prayed that over myself and my family as the father of the family, because I have the authority as the father through matrimony and bearing children of binding over those who are my spiritual inferiors, my family. Right. So I did that. And then anything that you own or possess that could be related to Freemasonry, they must be renounced and removed formally from the house and be destroyed.
Yes.
And so we had some vessels, a flagon and a cup that looked, they weren't Catholic, that I received from that part of the family. And I said, you know what? I'm never going to use these things. I don't want anything has any sort of demonic or Freemasonic oath attached to them. So destroy those and renounce them and remove them from the house. So I think I'm good. Father Ripperger says Freemasonry doesn't just put threats on yourself, like you described the story, Matt, of the guy stripping down naked and the dagger pushed to his chest. As you go up, there are oaths against your children or against your female descendants that you bind. So as a father, you're binding your future generations under the oaths of Freemasonry. So those have to be broken.
Yep.
And Father Ripperger says often the spiritual fallout of Freemasonry on children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren is the curse of divorce. The spirits of Freemasonry haunt family lines with divorce.
Wow.
So if you don't want to get divorced,
exactly
you
right.
need to renounce these things and get exorcisms and get cleaned up.
Father Ripperger's order is called the Society of the Most Sorrowful Mother. I'm pleased to say he actually resides in my archdiocese, the Archdiocese of Denver. And for those who want to learn more about his new Society of Priests, the website is Dolorans, DOLORANS.org.
Okay, moderators, can you guys get that link? We got our moderators. Can you guys get that link and put it into the chat so that people can see that? Because I want people to go there, and I want them, if they have Freemasonry in their ancestry, I want them to be able to go to that site, because there you can download the renunciation prayers against Freemasonry in your ancestral line. So you need to get that. So if Will or Dan or anyone in our mods, if they could find that link, that'd be cool. All right, well, why don't we close up with some commentary that came from Bishop Athanasius Schneider, the great... Oh, before we do, I just want, because we were talking about infiltration.
Right.
My book, it's been a year now since I wrote it. I was just kind of thinking about this, I was like, man, this time last year, I was down, nose on the grindstone, getting that thing done. So everyone who got it, thanks so much. I never said that online. Thank you for everyone who has supported the book and bought it and written a review. I just checked this morning, and it has 1,600 reviews. So thanks to everyone who wrote a review. And if you haven't, please go over to Amazon.com and look up Infiltration if you've read it and leave a review. Maybe we can get it to 2,000. That'd be cool.
Very nice.
The book begins with a description of the Pope's condemning secret societies and Freemasons. So if this is something that's new to you and you don't understand, get Infiltration and read the first 50, 60 pages. It is a crash course 101 on secret societies, on Freemasonry, why it was invented, where it came from, and you'll get all the facts and the footnotes and the names and the places. It's important for you to understand that history and their theology. They have a wicked theology.
Yes.
And how that now is being infiltrated in the church. That's why the book's called Infiltration, is those principles of naturalism, which is the idea that Satan had, that I will become my own God through my own nature. I'll become my own God. That satanic idea is the religion of Freemasonry. It's alchemy. It's turning lead into gold, presumably, without the miracle of God, without grace, without Christ, without the sacraments. That is the demonic dogma of Freemasonry, that you can become your own God, you can become divine without Jesus and without the sacraments and without the church and without any of that stuff. So, look, guys, everything kind of comes together here. Freemasonry, infiltration of Freemasonry with Alta Vendita in the 1800s. Pius X saying, hey, guys, look out. This is happening in the church. I'm going to make an oath against modernism to fight it. And then the oath gets taken away. And then we have Vatican II. And then they change all 7 sacraments.
And the Roman Curia is restructured.
The Roman Curia, the rules for cardinals is changed. The rules for papal elections are changed. Canon law is changed in 1983. The entire means by which we canonize saints is changed in 1983. In 1986, we have the Pope hanging out with different religions and different rituals. And then, voila, 2019, 2020, we're with Pachamamas and Amazonian synods. Wake up, people. Wake up. This is not a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory that some guy made up in his study. This is reality. Cardinal McCarrick in the sex magic, in the immorality and all that stuff is the tip of the iceberg.
Yep. I've been reading recently, some people are speculating the Vatican is really just hoping that McCarrick will die and all of his secrets die with him. That's why we haven't seen that report that we were promised so long ago.
Well, someone just said it's been 500 days since we were promised a report on McCarrick. The church was going to do this was bad. McCarrick was doing these things? He was handing all of his envelopes full of wads of cash and doing all these horrible things? What? We're going to do a report on this. Here we are, 500 days later. It's been over 1,000 days since the dubia wasn't answered. 500 days now we've been promised a McCarrick report, and they're just twiddling their thumbs waiting for the man to die. Because they're worried that if they start doing a report on McCarrick, he's going to get on the phone with New York Times and say, yeah, on that date, I was with Cardinal so-and-so. And on that date, I was with Cardinal so-and-so.
Yep.
And we had this giant lake party.
So-and-so.
Yeah, we had this giant lake party. Oh, and Francis knew about this, and Benedict knew about that, and John Paul knew about that. Bye. That's what they're worried about.
Yep.